Labyrinths is brought to you by Knox Robinson Productions. Please consider becoming a patron. For as little as $5 a month, you can listen to Labyrinths ad-free.
Visit patreon.com/Knox Robinson to learn more.
I don't know what that is.
Mic check. Yep.
Mic check. We're not going to close the door?
I don't think we need to.
Okay, here you go, baby. You can play with that.
Okay, how do we begin this?
Feeling lost?
Then you're in the right place.
I'm Amanda Knox.
And I'm Christopher Robinson.
And this is Ask Us Anything.
Yeah, so this is a quick little bonus episode. We wanted to give you guys some updates on where we're at, what's going on with Labyrinths, and to answer some listener questions. Also, FYI, we have little baby Eureka in the vocal booth with us. And if you hear any
rustling or babbling, that's either us or her. Okay, so first off, we're aware that you have been missing an episode from us, and that is because we have the Blood Money miniseries finally coming out in April. It's very exciting.
For those of you who don't know what that is, we've been working on a 5-part miniseries about the history and ethics of true crime. And it's coming out in early April, and here's a little sneak peek.
I thought my only way out was to kill myself. I didn't know what else to do.
I went into complete shock. I disassociated.
They see it as entertainment. They don't see us as real people.
The online sleuths, I've got a very complicated history with that group.
My stories have gotten people freed from prison. It's helped catch killers.
There is no standards and protocols for how to handle any of that.
And so you end up just chewing on the same nonsense until you're deep in a twisted funhouse of mirrors.
Somebody asked, is it disrespectful if I wear something that has blood spatter on it?
It sells newspapers, it sells magazines, it gets viewership. And that's what it's all about. It's money, money, money.
Another thing to put on your radar, if you're not getting enough Chris and Amanda time, you can get us in parent mode on the podcast Younglings, which we do with our friends Brady and Kylie. Who are across the pond, as they say.
Yes, 2 couples, both young parents, muddling their way through this parenthood thing, navigating disasters.
just interesting conversations between people who don't know what they're doing.
It's fun, and we're kind of an odd couple.
Yeah, it's interesting. For people who have no idea what they're doing, we have strong opinions about things, as it turns out. So it's a fun back and forth. We're learning from each other.
So yeah, check out Younglings. And another piece of news, we're going to be doing a live podcast episode of Labyrinths in August at the Thing Festival in Port Townsend.
So if you're anywhere near the Pacific Northwest, first of all, the Pacific Northwest in August is absolutely beautiful. Don't miss it. Port Townsend is this lovely seaside town, and the Thing Fest is all about music and art, and we're going to be contributing our humble podcast to the whole endeavor.
Hope to see you there. Otherwise, you can keep up with us on Patreon. As always, we've been doing live video hangouts with our patrons, behind-the-scenes videos.
Yeah, ad-free episodes.
And, of course, every so often, our media recommendations to feed your mind. Information about all this stuff, of course, at knoxrobinson.com.
All right, should we get on to questions?
Yeah. Listener questions. One listener writes in asking, how do you find balance when you are sharing your story in regards to reliving the trauma and healing from it?
I think that's directed at you, my love.
Oh, yeah.
That's a really great question. And I think I'm still trying to find that balance because from my own experience, trauma is just this weird package that you have to carry around with you no matter what, kind of for the rest of your life. And you're always in the process of making sense of it. And sharing my story has been a part of that journey for me. So it has been healing. It also is incredibly exhausting and occasionally re-triggering. So I think there's no real right answer. It's just checking in with yourself. And I think, ironically, the sharing your story part sort of forces you to check in on yourself. Hey, baby. Hey, baby, you want attention? Oh, you want milk? Do you want to go grab
I'll go
milk?
get her some milk.
Yeah.
You can ramble about trauma.
Okay.
Welcome to the Rambling About Trauma podcast.
What was I saying? Yeah. So again, just being very self-aware, feeling how things feel when you say them aloud, and giving yourself space to determine whether or not that's good for you in a moment. Like, one of the rules that I try to go by is I try not to tell my story very often. It's kind of a special occasion that I can work myself up to, and then I can have a lot of time, a tail end to have a bit of a trauma hangover. But in the same moment,
I have to deal with your trauma hangovers.
However, I have to say that one of the most healing experiences from telling my story has been hearing other people's stories when they have empathized with me or something about what I said resonated with them. And, like the other day, somebody was telling me how he had met me, and if he didn't know anything about me, he would have just assumed that I was a regular person who had a regular life. And I reminded him that you never know what anybody is carrying with them, what kind of trauma people are bearing, whether they seem healthy or not. And so he wanted to tell me that it left a really lasting impression, and that he's trying to be just kinder in general, not knowing what kind of things people are carrying.
All right.
We're not going to touch the microphone.
Eureka is trying to
we're not.
mangle the microphone.
Yes. Hi, baby.
Another question. What would be your definition of someone acting in bad faith? And do you believe it's generally worthwhile to attempt dialogue with someone who is acting in bad faith, if your primary objective is to find common ground with them?
Ooh, that's a really good question, because for me, the problem is figuring out if that person is intentionally acting in bad faith or unintentionally acting in bad faith.
There's no such thing as unintentionally acting in bad faith.
I know, but I think my point in bringing that up is I think that when we identify someone acting in bad faith, as in knowingly taking a negative side or attacking the straw man or just lying, a part of me is still on this journey of figuring out, like, how much self-control does that person have, and do they feel like they're acting in bad faith or not? Like, I'm wondering what the internal experience is of someone who is acting in bad faith.
What you're perhaps suggesting is that a lot of the times when we think someone is acting in bad faith, they actually don't think that they themselves are acting in bad faith.
Right. And I think there's a lot of, like, people pointing fingers, saying, you're acting in bad faith, or you're acting in bad faith, when I don't think that that's necessarily the case.
Okay, well, given that there are borderline hard to tell cases, that doesn't invalidate the fact that there are clearly times when someone's just trolling you.
Yeah.
Right? And, I went down this rabbit hole a little bit when Amanda and I first started dating many moons ago. And, I would see people on the internet being very cruel to her. And I thought, okay, I'm a smart guy. I know a little bit about psychology. I know how to approach somebody with curiosity and kindness and all this stuff. And I thought, there's got to be a way that I can get through to these people. And so I would try, and they would, of course, claim, they would put all the dressing of acting in good faith. Oh, I'm just asking questions. I'm curious about the evidence. They would say things like that. And so I would think, okay, maybe I can reach this person. But when I tried to troll whisper, as I called it, I quickly realized it was very unproductive, and that it never once worked. That the people who were giving me all the outward signs of being genuinely curious about the evidence would immediately fall back into conspiracy thinking and would not actually care about the evidence. And often I would find out they would send me to one of the hater sites, and they themselves had been obsessive about the case, who are convinced from day one that Amanda's a heinous murderer, right? So I guess the lesson I learned from that was it wasn't worth my time and the energy that it drained from me and the energy that it took away from my relationship with Amanda. It's like, while I was on Twitter arguing with these bad faith people, or these, maybe are they good faith, maybe are they bad faith, I wasn't paying attention to the person right in front of me, even though I was, trying to defend her honor. So I think that no, you do not attempt to have dialogue with someone who you have very good reason to believe is acting in bad faith. But of course, you don't know that right away. And so those opening salvos of a conversation are to try and figure out if the person you always approach with, okay, you got to have a probative question of some kind to see if that person, maybe that's the question. Like, how do you quickly determine whether or not someone's acting in good faith or not?
Well, and then there's another twist to this, which is sometimes you have no choice but to attempt dialogue with someone who is acting in bad faith. Like, there are some circumstances where being on trial for murder is one of them, where you have no choice but to attempt to have a common sense dialogue with people who are acting in bad faith. And it's incredibly, incredibly frustrating because ultimately it feels like an impossible task, and you have to sort of try to find someone else to talk to. It's people who are genuinely acting in bad faith. If you can avoid dialogue with them, that's great. But it also takes some probing to figure out if someone is genuinely acting in bad faith or if they're just being automatically defensive in the way that most people constantly are just automatically defensive. So it's difficult and often it's attempting the dialogue and finding out whether it is worthwhile that tells you the answer to that question.
I mean, that in terms of how do you find common ground and why should you? When someone's acting in bad faith, it's usually around a particular subject. And chances are that you do have common ground with them about a whole host of other things that are not the contentious thing at hand. And so...
And if they're willing to grant you things like common ground things that you agree with, instead of just immediately attacking you and attacking the straw man, it's a good sign.
Yeah, well, and also, like, what is your goal? Is your goal to see the humanity of this person? Is your goal to become friends with them? Is your goal to convince them of the one thing that you know that they disagree with you on? If it is that last goal, the best way you're going to get a bad faith actor to turn into a good faith actor is to spend quality time engaging on the common ground stuff you actually share.
And then you'd be surprised how that automatic defensive mechanism that a lot of people who are acting in bad faith put up can fall down.
Yep. Okay, another question. I always enjoy hearing about how you kept a positive attitude when nothing was going right, the concept of winning even when you're losing. My question would be, after you've come out the other side, how do you manage when the trauma gremlins bring you back to that time? What works to calm you when the past jumps in front of you and scares you?
Asking for a friend, it says. So trauma gremlins, I like that visual that you're just walking along down the street and then out of the bushes jumps this creepy monster that triggers you and makes you want to run. And
when has that happened to you?
Well, so I was about to say that happens in degrees, but the moment that I think about that most clicks with is when I went to the Seattle International Film Festival to see a Italian film. And I didn't know it going into it, but this Italian film was actually going to be in Napolitano dialect, which up until that point, I had only ever heard in prison. And specifically, there was this moment where a character called from the street to the window of another character and basically said, "Come to the window." And the way that he said it was, "Affacciati, show your face." And again, that specific phrase, "affacciati," I had only ever heard in prison in the context of prisoners calling down the hall to each other, telling other prisoners to come to the cell door so they could have a conversation across the hallway. So when I heard that character say affacciati, I was already a little bit on edge because I was hearing Napolitano dialect. And then suddenly that trauma gremlin just jumped onto the scene, and I was plunged into a panic attack. I started hyperventilating, and it was only made worse because I was in a theater full of people. And in that moment, there was nothing really that could have calmed me down. I needed to just leave. And sometimes that's the right thing to do. Sometimes the only thing that works is to escape the situation that is triggering to you. As time has gone on, trauma gremlins have been less in your face to me, less sudden or big and overwhelming. But all the same, there are trauma gremlins that bring me back to those times. And a lot of times what works to help calm me down is to be really rooted in the present. So just really just taking a deep breath and remembering where I am and looking at the thing that is frightening me in the face. So taking it off my shoulders and putting it in front of me. And sometimes it's just needing a hug, like asking for a hug or going and petting a cat. Just like taking, or another thing that really helps me is just making myself a cup of tea, because the process of just sitting down with a warm drink and giving yourself time to just feel what you're feeling is sometimes what you need. I think the instinct is to always run away from trauma gremlins, and sometimes that's just a trauma gremlin fairy godmother who is really just being like, hey, here's something you haven't processed in a while. How about you just take a moment and process it? I'm sorry that's inconvenient to you right now, but here it is.
But you're on my
Deal
schedule.
with it. Yeah.
It reminds me of what Chris Ballou told us in our Labyrinth interview with him about the parts work, where he thinks of the various parts of himself. And, the trauma gremlin is a part of yourself that is saying, I'm panicking about this thing in the past. And, rather than telling that part of yourself, shut up, that we're not in the past anymore, rather than being confrontational with the part of yourself that's kind of still stuck there, instead you treat it with kindness and with care and say, I hear you. I hear you that you're still feeling that.
Yeah, actually, Daniel Tiger is really good for these kind of things. I the more I'm spending time with children's stuff, the more I realize that the lessons are actually really good. But, it sounds like a Daniel Tiger kind of takeaway, which is, when you're feeling sad, ask why and maybe you'll feel better, like stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, actually.
Yeah, Eureka wasn't having it in here in the vocal booth, so I threw on a Daniel Tiger, and she's now having her brain hypnotized into good moral lessons.
Yay!
Yeah. One more note on the trauma gremlin. I think for a lot of emotional difficulties, people forget how much the body is an important part of your experience of reality. And you think that when you're having a tiff with your spouse, or when, you and a friend are on the outs, or when the trauma of some past event, rears its head, that the way through or the way out or the way to deal with it is always to directly engage. But often things like, the tea thing is a example of this, but also sunlight or exercise. Like, the way that you feel is not, most of the time, I would venture even all of the time, the result of what you're thinking, but rather of the neurochemical makeup of your brain, which is affected by all kinds of things going on with your body. And so if you get some vitamin D, if you get some exercise, the chemical makeup of your brain changes. And if you eat something, if your blood sugar goes up, it changes. So don't ignore those things or think that they're somehow not real ways of dealing with the trauma gremlins, because they're totally real ways of dealing with your emotional state, because oftentimes your emotional state is a product of those things anyway, and you are mistakenly thinking that it is the result of the thing that your husband said to you. I'm defending myself here.
Yeah. We'll see about that.
Yeah, have a sandwich.
Yeah. We could give you lots of reasons to support Labyrinths on Patreon, including ad-free episodes and exclusive patron-only content. But why not hear it direct from a listener?
My name is Henry, and I've been a supporter of the Labyrinths podcast for some time. I can totally relate to the concept of feeling lost, and I think the stories have helped me tremendously getting through these last couple of years, and I think they would help others as well.
Visit patreon.com/Knox Robinson. Another listener writes, any big projects you're working on that you can share about?
That's the trick, that we can share about.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of projects in the works that we can't technically share yet. Sorry.
What we can say is that there are multiple literary book projects that we're working on, and that there are multiple TV space projects that we're working on. Now, that stuff is all tentative and nothing's real till it's real. But when it is real, we will tell you. But rest assured, we are working hard on it.
And it's very exciting. It's a very exciting time.
Another listener asks about the Murdaugh case. Alex Murdaugh said he cringed as he read the YouTube video titled Body Language Expert Weighs In.
Oh, God.
Do we have thoughts on the case?
Well, actually, we don't have thoughts on the case because I wasn't aware of this case somehow. We've been so busy working on the Blood Money series, ironically, that we haven't been paying attention to much of anything else. That, and I've just been taking care of baby.
We don't follow true crime.
Yeah, sorry, guys. We haven't followed them. What I can say, though, is any YouTube video where body language expert weighs in makes me cringe, because that is such a false art that people put so much, like they feel so superior when they're body language experts. And I just, no, it's a pseudoscience and it's a waste of YouTube video space, but
the only thing that I really paid attention to with the Murdaugh case was a Time magazine article about what the evolutionary origins of our obsession with this kind of spectacle is.
Oh, right. And how it might be we are as very vulnerable animals that have no claws and no teeth and no natural armor. We're very alert to threats, that kind of thing.
So stories about violence and about threats and about potential predators in our midst obviously draw our attention. And then the kind of double whammy is the status thing. We're obsessed with status, hence the celebrity magazines, right? And this is the merging of those two things. And similar to the OJ case. Why were America's eyes riveted on that? It's those two things. And a few other things thrown in for good measure, like the racism stuff, right?
Yeah, just a little bit of the racism stuff.
So, on a meta level, I'm fascinated with the public obsession with this case, and to the point where, the New York Times is covering it, just as much as the New York Post is. And you think...
Is it worth that?
Yeah,
is it really worth that?
All the news that's fit to print, right? This is just a murder case.
This is one guy who murdered his wife and kid.
That kind of thing, sadly, happens all the time. And why is this guy's case front page news?
Yeah, why is it a selling point? That's an interesting question.
Because people want to know about it, and because the standards of journalism are catering to what people want to know, not what people should know.
Good for them, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry to shame you if you're deep into following the Murdaugh case.
Yeah. Please, it's important. I don't know.
Someone writes, your laughter, Amanda, is big and boisterous and infectious.
Oh, geez.
Hearing your laughter, considering what you've endured in life, is immensely life-affirming, which I take to mean, how do you keep laughing after going through hell? Which, by the way, I don't know if you all know this, but Amanda's laugh very often includes... Includes a snort.
It's true. Yeah, if you really get me laughing, I start snorting. I don't know. I feel like if you've been through something really insane and horrible, the absurdity of life becomes so much more apparent. I mean, I've always been even so before I went through everything in Italy, I was a very upbeat person. I would wake up happy, I would go to bed happy. That was just my emotional default setting. But I think that as my emotional default setting shifted towards sad as a result from the trauma, my sense of humor went way up. And I think it was a little bit like that positive energy shifting in a way. And I think the wonderful thing about humor is that it's so complex. Like sometimes the thing that is so freaking funny is also so sad. And things that are both sad and life affirming are come together in comedic ways. And so I don't know. I just my sense of humor has really deepened and grown. My respect for comedy has deepened and grown. I have so much respect for comedians. And the thing I've also found about comedians is a lot of them are dealing with like tremendous amounts of trauma. And it makes sense to me. So I don't know, like the impulse to laugh at the absurdity of existence and also just funny shit is something that comes very naturally to me, and I feel lucky for that.
All right. We're going to do a lightning round here because...
Lightning round?
Lightning round,
We have some bonus questions?
We got bonus questions,
Oh, no.
yeah.
Okay.
What's your favorite movie?
The Princess Bride?
Okay.
So again, this is coming automatically. I don't fully stand by anything I say, but The Princess Bride is a good answer.
We had heard one of the reasons you were charged was because of how you and the boyfriend at the time reacted to the news of the murder. Have you looked into how one is supposed to act when your roommate is killed? Is there a class? Is it lots of crying and screaming? Silence?
I mean, I think this guy is basically shaming people who have,
The thing I'll direct you to in response to that question is check out episode 4 of Labyrinths, an interview with Malcolm Gladwell, where in the opening act, we kind of dissect the argument he lays out about Amanda's case in his book, Talking to Strangers, and offer our own take on it, and in specific, how and why people viewed Amanda and Raffaele the way they did in those first days after Meredith was murdered, and how cognitive bias affected all of that. What's your favorite quote?
My favorite quote? I mean, okay, so the first thing that came to mind, it's not my favorite quote, but it's the first thing that came to mind, which is to be or not to be, which is depressing as all hell. It's not my favorite quote, but it's the first one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, it is an amazing soliloquy, right?
And also just like that, the conciseness of the question, to be or not to be.
I mean, concise, but then whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune.
Or to take to arms against
the sea of troubles and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. There's the one.
No one said that Hamlet was concise.
What element of the Italian court system or Italian criminal procedure that perhaps you experienced and were surprised to learn existed in contrast to the American system?
Automatic appeals. So that is something that the American justice system could really learn from, is the fact that it is expected that another higher court is going to see things differently potentially than a court that originally convicted you, and that it's worthwhile for people of a higher caliber to take a look at your case. That is something that here in the United States, people have to fight tooth and nail to obtain. So automatic appeals.
Great. I'm a big fan of your compassionate perspective and the truth about true crime. Any plans to work more with Damien Eccles or maybe Jason Baldwin?
Ooh, this is one of those things that we kind of can't share yet.
Well, those are, for those of you who don't know, Damien and Jason, along with Jesse Miskelly, are the West Memphis 3. wrongly convicted of murdering 3 8-year-old boys in West Memphis, Arkansas in the 90s. And recently we did an interview with Jason Baldwin. You can check that out on Labyrinth. I think it's number 64. And we have been researching and writing about the Satanic Panic. And the West Memphis 3 is a keystone case in the Satanic Panic. So that's all we can say about that for now. But yes, what is your greatest worry for your child's future?
That she will feel like she's living in the shadow of the worst experience of my life.
Do you think she will?
I don't know. I mean, it's pretty big, and it's a big shadow. I feel it over me, and I'm trying my best to make sure that she does not feel it extending over her.
Okay, and the real last question. What advice would you offer the parents of college students who wish to study in Italy, or anywhere else for that matter?
Well, 100%, I think that they should go for it. The study abroad experience is absolutely a wonderful, life-affirming experience that broadens people's horizons and makes the world a better place. The one thing that I would say that I wish I had known before I had gone to Italy is just how vulnerable I would be being alone in a foreign place. Like, I didn't really fully comprehend. Like, I even remember having conversations with my parents about what I would do in emergency situations. Like, what would I do if my passport got stolen? Or what would I do if I got sick? And we, had answers for all those questions, but I never really fully had a conversation with them about the kinds of horrible things that I experienced and that Meredith experienced, and that not a lot of people, but definitely some people experience things like sexual assault or things like theft, or, like there's a lot of things that can happen to you when you are vulnerable. And being in a foreign place is one way of being vulnerable in a very new way. So I think that what I would suggest is maybe have your kid watch the Netflix documentary on my case and have it be an opportunity for them to ask questions and explore ideas and at the same time not freak them out. Like, what happened to me is exceptionally rare. At the same time, though, it's really important to think about how you just are a little bit extra vulnerable in that kind of space, and that's what leads to so many good experiences, and that's what also could make you vulnerable to bad experiences. So being willing to ask for help, being willing to listen to that fear instinct. That's
the big one that I think about, that you felt like you were such an adult at 20.
I know.
And that, your mom is like, get out of there, get on a plane, come home. And you're like, no, I'm here to help the police. They need my help.
The police told me not to leave.
And what I think about when I imagine our daughter 18 years hence going off on a study abroad, is like, even now, she wants to climb the stairs by herself. And there are times when she's like, no, I don't want your hand, Dad. I'm a big girl. I can do it. And I can see that dynamic coming into play. And what I don't really have an answer to, maybe you do, listeners, is like, how do you navigate that line as a parent even, in order to build the relationship in such a way that your child is willing and desirous of your help?
Well, I think the other thing that people don't do a lot that they should do prior to studying abroad is talking to people who have studied abroad before. Like, that's, I know that what teenagers don't want to listen to their parents. So don't listen to the parents. Go and talk to somebody who has studied abroad and just ask them, like, what were your good experiences? What were your bad experiences? What are things that you wish you had known before you had gone? And try to find people in your life and that can offer those kinds of insights to your kids.
All right, you heard it here. Don't listen to your parents.
Don't listen to them. Who are they? Just some jerks.
All right, thanks for all these questions, and stay tuned for Blood Money, the history and ethics of true crime. Once again, you can find us at knoxrobinson.com. I'm on Twitter at ManUnderBridge.
I'm on Twitter at Amanda Knox.
And we'll have more Labyrinths for you coming soon. Thanks for hanging in there with us.
Thanks, guys.
Hello, listener. This episode of Labyrinths could be ad-free, but that requires exclusive access. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to become a monthly Patreon subscriber, which will grant you access to top-secret patron-only content. This podcast will self-destruct without your support. Was that too cheesy?
Who doesn't like cheese? Visit patreon.com/Knox Robinson.